Hi there, my name is Teni Brant, and welcome to Speak Dicely, the podcast where I get together with other tabletop enthusiasts and we speak dicely together. To get the most out of tabletop roleplay, many players will try to immerse themselves in the worlds that they're playing in. DMs can assist this through world building and creating world lore, but players can help in this immersion by learning how to stay in character. Though you don't have to be good at staying in character to have a good time, learning to do so will take your storytelling experiences to a whole new level. Joining me today to talk about this subject are Nikki Haggart and Annie Yao. Hello there.
Hi. Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, good. How's everybody doing today?
Not bad. I'm actually a tiny bit under the weather. I don't know if you can hear it, and before everybody goes like, coronavirus, it's not. It's not.
Oh dear. Well, hopefully you get better soon. I didn't even notice.
Oh, great. Now I'm just like mildly headachy, but like still functional. So I'm good.
And how about yourself, Nikki?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah. Had a bit of a lazy, nice, slow start to the day. So excited to talk with you today.
Oh, that's great. I'm happy to talk with you guys. This is the first podcast episode where I've brought in folks that I don't actually know beforehand. So this is actually quite the exciting experience for me as well.
Ooh.
You know, getting to know each other, getting to know a bit about everybody's role-playing experiences. And it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So to let our listeners kind of get to know you guys a bit better, want to talk about yourselves, what it is you're passionate about, what can we get at the core of you?
Are you doing that because you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it, Annie.
I was like, what is two-finger pointing? Great. So, oh gosh, it is a bit of a loaded question for me because what am I passionate about? One thing that people have said about me, and then I'm sure Nikki's going to be like, I've never heard this in my entire life. But a lot of people have said that I'm a bit jack of all trades, but like master of none. So I have a lot of interests. Obviously, acting is a huge passion, and writing and creating stories, creativity stuff. I love a lot of things that have to do with art, but I also like a lot of other random things. Like I was really into rock climbing for a while. A lot of like activities when I was growing up, and I think that stuck with me, I was really like obsessed with the Tomb Raider games, and I grew up wanting to be like Lara Croft. So I was just like, I want to learn like all these skills, like horseback riding, archery, and like gun handling, which I haven't done yet, but sword fighting, and like, so I just learned a bunch of random skills, which I love doing all the time. And yeah, but a lot of it has to do with like trying to be badass and like creating a fun story and like doing something entertaining and performative, I suppose.
I don't want to diminish any of my previous guests on the show, but I think you are officially the most badass person that I brought onto this show now.
Thank you. I was going to say, oh no. But it was a weird reflex.
As for me, Nikki, I am an actor, writer, musician, and I guess what I'm most passionate about in my work and life is I'm really interested in storytelling as a form of escapism and a form of expression in a way that is larger than life. So a lot of what I write and some of my favorite projects that I've had the chance to be a part of kind of really merge the fantastical and realism. And that's, I think, why I'm drawn to RPGs, definitely. Yeah.
All right. So the pair of you have acting experience, which kind of ties into today's episode as well. And I think this kind of gives you guys a bit more credence as to talk on this subject. But do you guys also want to share a bit about how you got into tabletop role-playing games? I assume you both play Dungeons & Dragons, or have you tried other systems as well?
Only Dungeons & Dragons for me. I don't know about Nikki.
Mostly Dungeons & Dragons, yes. I've recently joined a campaign of Aegon, which is a Greek myth-based RPG, which has been a lot of fun, and uses another system that I'm still getting used to.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. But my first Dungeons and Dragons experience, I believe I was filling in for someone. Yeah, one of my friends was the dungeon master and just invited me to one session because he was missing a player. And I was very excited and very nervous. And I was playing a chaotic neutral rogue. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. It's not, at all who I am. And the first thing we had to do was we were encountering some kind of monster that was demanding a flesh sacrifice.
Oh, no.
And the group with them had this pseudo dragon. So I'm like, this is something Nikki would never do, but I'm like, guys, you should just feed your pseudo dragon to this monster.
Oh, no.
And what I didn't know is that pseudo dragons can talk, because I didn't know anything at this point. So then the pseudo dragon starts begging for his life in an adorable little voice. And so that was my first experience with having to stay in character, I guess, was, having to deal with this poor little pseudo dragon that I am trying to feed to an angry monster.
That is so wild. I can't believe you did something like that. Because all your other characters have been so morally good.
Yeah.
And when we want to like go and slaughter things, you're the one who's there's like, but no, guys, we can't because it would be bad.
But sometimes you just got to feed a pet to a monster and it's all good.
Yeah, cute talking pet. That is so, oh my gosh. I can't get over that. My first D&D experience or tabletop role-playing experience started, I was actually really, really into video game RPGs for the longest, like way before that. So that kind of like got me kind of started understanding the concept and the system of like role-playing and like leveling up and like, all the little fun game intricacies to like optimize your character and whatnot. But it was actually pre my acting training. So it was a lot different, that experience, compared to like the D&D games I've played post my acting training. So yeah, I was in university. I was playing with some guys in university. Back then, when being a nerd and being a geek wasn't exactly cool yet. So people did it a lot in hiding in their parents' basements. And then, being a geek became really cool and D&D became all the rage. So all that got fixed. But my first experience was very interesting because I made a character that was very like straightforward. I remember she was a paladin. She was named after me, Annikis, which is now the name that I use everywhere. She was a lawful good paladin. And it got so frustrating to play because everything she had to do had to be good and nice and for the people, and I had to save everyone, and it had to be for like the greater good. And at first it was fun and easy to do that because it was very much the character I created. Like, not knowing more about character development was very, like, it was very two-dimensional. Like, it was very much like, okay, I have these spells, I have these powers, I got my sword, I got my shield, and I just defend my friends and I forge on and adventure, type of thing. But it was a campaign that lasted really, really long. And it spanned something like 5 years. It was insane.
Wow.
But yeah, I remember starting when I first started university, and we continued after I graduated, and we met on a weekly basis. And back then D&D was also, I mean, it still is now, but it's just like such an excuse to like, just like, we can swear, right?
Oh yeah. This podcast is listed as explicit, so go nuts.
Amazing.
Well, maybe not nuts.
Because I'm about to say that it's just an excuse to sort of like fuck off for like an entire evening or an entire afternoon, right? And you just get to like eat junk food all day and drink beer because legally we're allowed to drink beer, and like and you were like kind of tipsy and you just kind of hung out and did some random imaginary stuff, and it was really, really fun. But as the game progressed, I started understanding that, like, oh yeah, it wasn't just about playing by the rules. It wasn't just about like respecting the rules and following, what the DM sets out to like for you to do. Like, no good DM would railroad you in any way. And we had a really good DM, so he was very good and creative and gave us lots of options and surprises and stuff like that. So as we progressed throughout the years, I realized there were a lot of random things that you could do, but because I had to stay in character, sometimes I would want to like do something mildly chaotic or mildly evil, kind of like, I want to participate in like raiding this village, or like, we should like sacrifice that guy. He's a total douche. And then the DM would be like, but you are lawful good. You cannot like you would not be okay with this. And I'd be like, God damn it. Why? Yeah. So I mean, it was one of my first experiences encountering something where I was kind of like made to stay in character in a certain sense. I was able to do it a lot better later on, but yeah, those were one of the first ones.
Kind of opposite experiences.
Yeah. and that point, I'll have to remember to bring this up when we get to this question I've prepared, because I feel like that ties in very well. Every time I hear some people's how they got into D&D or tabletop, I always love hearing these stories. Everybody's got such different experiences, and I love hearing stories. And I think that's, well, I think I can safely say that's kind of what we all like about doing role play and tabletop, right?
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The stories we hear along the way.
Yep.
Otherwise, we are here today to talk about how the listeners at home can kind of learn how to stay in character. So what does it mean to stay in character, and why is it important for tabletop role-playing games?
I think it adds a lot of fun to the story. This is probably not the right answer, but for me personally, staying in character is just so much more fun, especially nowadays. Whenever I make a character, I make them extremely, extremely flawed. Just because I'm like in love with characters who just cannot help themselves and absolutely like have these impulses, or like it's in their nature to do something that's kind of like awful for other people. I don't know why it amuses me, probably because I can't do it in real life. So I kind of like just vicariously do it in role-playing games to like get that out of my system. Now everybody's going to think I'm a horrible person. But I think that is part of the fun, and the fact that if you get a really, really good group together and everybody can, have their own individually flawed characters, it makes a really fun dynamic, because conflicts and fights and interesting ways of resolving it or not resolving it will come up in the game.
Yeah, I think our characters' actions are how, the power that the players have over the world, that the DM is responsible for most of the world creation, but we have power over what happens in this world because of our characters' actions. And I think the more we're able to stay in character and be really true to that, the more integrity the world and the game has as a whole.
Yeah, it's just I mean, every once in a while I still get reminded that that's not in character. Or sometimes every once in a while, like really want to do something that's so. My most recent character is a half orc barbarian, whose name is Jane, and she has something like 8 intelligence, and it's just like there's so many things that I'll often be, because me like the player Annie, I'm a very analytical person. And like I overthink a lot of things. So it's been like sometimes it's been a little bit of a challenge to play Jane because she doesn't overthink things. And sometimes I'll think of like a really, really good idea to like solve a problem. And I'll be like, oh, I really want to do this. But then I'll be like, damn it, Jane will not think of that. Jane would never think of that. And there's been a lot of mess ups because of this. One of the earlier versions of Jane, I played Jane more than once. One of the earlier versions of Jane, I remember she was like kind of like, minding her own business in her hut or whatever. And suddenly this messenger shows up, knocks on the door, and then she like yanks open the door and she's like, who are you? What do you want? And then this like tiny scare little messenger boy was like, well, I have a message for you. And I was like, fine. I like rip it out of his hands and I slammed the door. And then the dungeon master just kind of goes, you can't read. I was like, ah! And I like rip open the door again, yank the boy back into the house, and was just like, here, read this. So there's a lot of like really funny, I swear Jane is my favorite because there's a lot of really funny moments with her like that. where she just doesn't think things through. There's another moment with Jane where, and I remember I was like, I know this is a terrible idea, but this is what Jane would do. This is a campaign that I was in with Nikki, actually, with our mutual friend as a dungeon master, and we were doing like this really huge boss fight. We reached the top of a tower. We're fighting a boss, and I don't remember exactly what the boss was. I think she was a changeling, or she did magic, or I forget. I forget what she was exactly. But I just remember that the team was kind of like getting pummeled, and Jane just got really upset. And instead of like dealing like a mighty blow or something like that, she just threw her out the window. And as that boss flew out the window, it shapeshifted into like a bird or some was it a bird? I think it was a bird or a raven or something. And then like flew away, and everybody got really frustrated with me. And I was like, I know, I'm sorry, but this is what Jane would do.
It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, lots of moments like that. And I do like I think it's like a new thing with the new edition. I'm not like super well versed with all the different editions and different rules, but there's like a new thing that got added that's called inspiration points, where we get awarded for doing things that are like extremely original and extremely in character, or that's how the DM explained it to us anyways. So it's like a bigger encouragement for us to kind of like stay in character and play in character, because we'll get points. And I like points. Who doesn't like points?
And I don't know if we've actually touched on it yet, but for anybody who's not as familiar with acting or role play, to stay in character is to kind of and I'm sure you could piece this together based on these stories that we've just told here, but is to kind of get rid of your own personal mindset as an individual and substitute it for the thought processes of the character you're trying to portray, and making decisions on their behalf that is more true to them and what they would think they would do as opposed to what you think they would do.
Yeah, pretty much. There is one, again, in the campaign that Nikki and I were in, there's this one character. I mean, I love the player to death. She's such a lovely person, but her character's always stealing from us. And
no.
I wish she would just not. I get so upset about it. But yeah, and I do like our group there because everybody's like extremely flawed, and one just likes to go on like these grand speeches, and everybody's always like rolling their eyes and like, oh.
Yeah, and I think, it's always you're never perfectly gonna be able to turn off that little voice in your head that's, what Annie would do versus what Jane would do. But I think that's kind of the fun, is finding a way to marry that. And, if Annie knows that this is what has to be done, even if, Jane's intelligence is really too low to figure that out, it's like, well, what has to happen to make Jane come to this conclusion, and I think that's when we end up learning a lot about our characters, is with those kind of prompts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I find that I find it especially fun when like you have to miss a session and somebody has to like guest play you. I do find it extremely fun because I was just like, I mean, it was a great idea at the time. I don't remember the context exactly because I came back to it because I was gone. So maybe Nikki can fill in the situation. But I just remember coming back and then like being told that I had this elaborate plan with Jane. I was just like, would Jane think of this? I guess. But then the plan didn't work out. I was like, all right, I guess that would, I don't know, Nikki, would you like to explain what happened?
Well, essentially, I think what happened, the situation you came back to is we're like, Jane is now in possession of a huge amount of bread.
What?
It was a great session. Basically, our end goal was just to like cause a riot in this small town, and so we all went off and we're like, how much chaos can we each cause in each one of these neighborhoods? And my dear friend Nicole, who was filling in for Annie, decided to buy as much bread as humanly possible in an attempt to cause chaos via pigeons in this town. And for whatever reason, that didn't come to be. But We never wanted for bread for the next couple sessions, so that was great.
Wait, did
And
you use up my gold for that?
I don't know. I think she got a good deal. She's an
Okay.
intimidating lady.
I should have checked. I was like, am I missing a lot of gold for all the bread that I have now?
So yeah, that's I think an interesting case about, how, this is how, you look at that character sheet and, those traits and, adding your own flavor to it, bringing yourself to that character, you're going to come up with something that is very uniquely you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I do find that dungeon masters are so amazing at staying in character for like the NPCs that they play, especially if it's a recurring one. Like if we constantly go back to town to like the same tavern or like the same quest giver or like the same king or whatever, guard captain. And like the fact that they can consistently play that person over and over again throughout time without, with like gaps in between, and they have so many characters to switch in between. I find that that's like a huge it's a huge endeavor, and they're amazing for being able to do that and to like keep all these people in their heads.
There may be a little bit of illusion work behind that, but as a DM, I don't kind of want to give away these trade secrets just yet. All these stories, like this hilarious bread situation, when it comes to steering a character and in the context of tabletop role playing, we definitely get a lot more leniency to have fun like this, because we don't, though you guys are, you don't have to be an actual actor to be able to do this. So you get to have these moments of silliness, and it just makes sense because everybody agrees that it's hilarious, and everybody's there to have a good time instead of having to, do it for work, which would require you to be a bit more serious about your staying in character and what your character is.
Yeah, for sure. Like there's no pressure to like, we can have like discussions in between and like kind of like decide as a group what to do, or like you can kind of talk to yourself for like 2 minutes to decide what to do, as opposed to if you're improvising or if you're on stage or like, in front of, you can't necessarily spend like 15 minutes planning what you're about to do. So there's definitely fun in that. There is that situation, though, where the DMs now, I feel like DMs everywhere suddenly have decided that if you take too long to make a decision as a group, they will just make something happen.
I think that's fair.
It's fair, but it's funny it is funny. It's funny and fair. I don't hate it. I like that. It moves the story along.
Yeah, it's kind of another way in which our decisions like affect the story, or in that case, our lack of decisions also affect the story, and just another reason why I really have to stay in that mindset of someone that's in an actual pressured situation.
Yeah, this is actually a great instance of an example of kind of staying in character, because if you're in the middle of combat and then you guys need like 10 minutes to talk about, okay, what should we do? It's like, do your characters really have the time to discuss this? And is taking that break deviating from staying in character?
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember there was like the group that I played with, and this is not to shit on them, but none of us were actors at the time. And, we were all in sciences, most of us anyways. And a lot of, there was this mindset of kind of like optimizing everything. So every situation was almost like discussed and like broken down and analyzed, and like, what's the best way we can get the most out of this entire situation. And sometimes it would be arguments because people wouldn't agree. Some people would just want to have fun. Some people just want to go ahead and see what happens. But then others would kind of be like, no, we absolutely have to like have like, the one with the highest percentage chance of like success. And that I found kind of took the fun out of it sometimes. And you lose the spontaneity, and obviously the DM gets very impatient waiting for us to decide and argue. So yeah, all that to say, I do like the new trend.
Yeah, that kind of thinking is what we refer to as metagaming.
Yes.
Thinking of the game as a game instead of letting things organically happen. Like if I mean, it makes sense if you're going through a dungeon, the rogue's at the front looking for traps. But if the one time the barbarian wants to be at the front and you're like, no, that's the rogue's job, well, that's metagaming because the barbarian just decided they wanted to. And that's a fun, spontaneous moment that we'll see how that affects the story.
Yeah, and it would be way more fun for the barbarian and the rogue just to argue as themselves to see who wants to go to the front, right? Like the barbarian could easily just like tie the rogue up or like, heave them over their shoulders and like ran around. Like, I don't know, I'm just making things up. But I'm just saying you can resolve a lot of those things in character and it's infinitely more fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say on the topic of, actors versus non-actors, some of my favorite moments playing have been when playing with people who don't have any performance experience. And it just kind of like, you see a character click for them kind of, and you see, this character sheet suddenly become a personality and them be able to, speak in this slightly different voice and think in this slightly different way. And that's just, as someone who does consider myself a storyteller first and foremost, I'm like, yes, this is what makes me happy.
Yeah, I do find that really fun. I love it when you see people like kind of like attempt or just like it's like so new to like use a different voice and like pretend to speak a certain way. And it's like it's so adorable to watch, which is why we created the character Alex. Because we wanted to show that in our Dungeons and Distancing web series, because Alex is kind of like the newcomer who's learning the rules and everything. So in the first episodes, I guess at this point it's not spoilers to talk about it, right? It's been out for a while.
We haven't really talked about what you guys do. So can you tell us a bit about this this Dungeons and Distancing project you guys are working on?
For sure, yeah. I definitely was like, no, I forgot to mention it at the beginning. Guess I'll mention it at the end. But the middle is just as good a time.
Well, we can reiterate at the end, too.
So Annie and I are co-creators of a web series called Dungeons and Distancing. It's a comedy web series that features a group of friends basically trying to get through all the trials and tribulations of the year 2020 while undergoing an online campaign. And we've shot it entirely over Zoom, all remotely in our own apartments. And it's been really fun to try and translate this game that we're really passionate about into a web series. And we've got to feature, all your favorite archetypes of both playable Dungeons and Dragons characters and Dungeons and Dragons players. We got the rules lawyer, we got the chaotic
neutral
person that gives the DM hell, and we've got the, of course, long-suffering DM. So it's been a lot of fun to play with that.
Yeah, it's been an homage paid to the DMs that we've put through torture, essentially, because we understand how hard they work and what they have to put up with sometimes. So yes, this character Alex is like a newcomer, and like we see him at the beginning kind of like trying to like learn this new voice and to be in character, and like he goes like and like and fair. I don't know his lines. I never learned his lines, but fare thee well, something. But yeah, it's fun, and we try to really put like a good balance of types of players, like Nikki says, and types of characters. One of our actors pointed out that we have these players who play characters that are somewhat more enhanced versions of themselves, is kind of like more ideal versions of themselves, whereas there's like some players like Nikki's character Becky, who plays a character who is the complete opposite of them, because Nikki's character Becky plays like this giant tank dude who's like, he's just very tanky and big and speaks in a low voice, and like it's really fun.
Yeah, it's been great to play just a super flighty individual who is also inhabiting a fighter half orc. It's been pretty great.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting challenge.
Yeah, this is a bit of a half boast. Feel free to cut this out.
I don't imagine I will.
this is a bit of a half boast, but I've spoken recently to a friend, and I haven't shared this news with Nikki yet, so she'll be happy to hear it. But it was such a compliment. I recently spoke with a friend who watched the series, the 3 episodes we've had so far, and she's like, "This reminds me a lot of Felicia Day's The Guild web series. It has
Oh.
like a lot of that same tone and like the pace and stuff like that." And I was just kind of in my head, I was like, like, just like squealing in joy, just because it was just like, that was such a phenomenon, The Guild, when it first came out. I don't know, it just felt like such a huge compliment. And
Well,
Happy to
listeners,
hear
if
that.
if that's not enough reason, you should go check it out. Go check out this series of Dungeons and Distancing, and we'll bring this up again at the end just to remind you all.
hooray.
But I'm going to bring us on to this next question I've got for us. So, what things can players do to help them stay in character?
I find the DMs very good at that. There's like, you can't do that. That is not what your character would do. I've been told that a lot in the past. I feel like Nikki's about to speak, so.
Well, this is just like a starter thing, because I think we've all, as most sessions have had to move online. One thing I've been struggling with is staying off the Facebook, staying off everything else while I am playing, and just really engaging with the story, because I feel like that's, so much of it. It's not just what happens when, the focus is on your character or it's your character's turn in the order. It's so much about taking in what's happening around them and then developing opinions about, the conversation 2 other characters had, and stuff like that. So just trying to, really stay engaged in the conversation, even if you're not active in that moment, just real trying to keep those distractions to a minimum.
Yeah, this is a very silly, simple thing to say, but I find that sometimes referring to my character sheet helps. Just because sometimes I forget, even despite being loving all the characters I create and all the flaws and stuff. Sometimes I do forget certain traits or characteristics about them, and sometimes just looking back on my character sheet, sometimes I'll be like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot to kind of like apply this personality side of her. So I should go back to trying that, and it would be fun, because the way I create characters now is always like, how would this affect the group dynamic? How would this affect quests? Like Jane is really like money hungry, so in the way that she makes decisions, it's always going to be kind of like whatever would get her the most gold. So, but sometimes I forget that. I forget that her backstory says that she really wants, all the money so that she can buy her village and kick her sister out. So I sometimes refer back to that, and it reminds me that that's what I'm going for as a character. And it's not just about eating meat and like is killing people with her axe.
And I think we also need to, be realistic and, take it easy on ourselves. Sometimes you're going to want to make those, out of character jokes or, meta jokes or whatever. And I think, that's okay as long as it's, you're able to drop back into your character and not let that completely sideswipe everything else that's going on. We're here to have fun.
Yeah. I do agree. I get very intense sometimes.
Yeah, and I mean, if you get really good at staying in character, and you are somebody who does like to make those aside jokes, eventually with practice, you may just learn how to learn your character's humor and be able to do that in character.
Yeah,
that's very
absolutely. And I mean, staying in character doesn't necessarily have to mean that you have to like talk in character and like kind of like move in character and like become the character whenever it's your turn to play the character. I think it just means a lot, like in the decision making, the group planning, or in problem solving, or in fights. Like it's just something that your character is more likely to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's only one good answer. There could be multiple things that your character might choose to do that would, stay within their alignment type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've touched on it before in your role-playing episodes, but for new players and even, older players, starting with a new character, like it always feels awkward at first, and there's always going to be that learning curve. But the only way to get better at it is to keep practicing, and don't let yourself feel defeated if you're like, that didn't feel quite right, or that probably wasn't the right decision for my character. Just you keep learning and you keep getting better, like anything else.
Mhm.
And what's great is that I find most dungeon masters are very lenient about that kind of stuff. It's like, unless they know you very well and they know that you're just kind of like being a dick and you could do better. And the groups, like if there are more experienced players, everybody kind of knows there's that first time when you start off. So nobody's going to kind of like shit on you or like kill you for kind of like slightly veering off or not being able to fall in character right away. It is something that takes practice. It's a certain type of mindset that you kind of get into.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you're like going into a new campaign, that staying in character is probably not going to be easy right away either, as not only do you have to learn who your character is, which learning your character is a great way to figure out how to stay in character, but you also got to learn what the group dynamic becomes. And knowing those two things will help inform how you can stay in character.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to compare like my very first campaign that I've ever played with the campaign that I've recently played, but the huge differences were in the first campaign that I've played, I don't think I had a lot of backstory, and everything was kind of just like a blank sheet, and I kind of like built as I went. Whereas in the most recent campaign that I'm playing with Nikki and friends, it's very much like everybody have like this huge story. They have like why they're here, what quest they want to be, why they are on this journey. And like we also decided beforehand who we knew and who we didn't know, like who were friends before the adventure started. So it does kind of affect the dynamic a little bit, because you'll be friendlier with certain characters and you'll be less friendly with certain other characters, and and then there'll be some inside jokes, and then there are some things that one character would do that is a really shitty thing, but you'll tolerate it because you knew them, quote unquote, as opposed to another character that you didn't know, and then they do the shitty thing and you just kind of like punch them in the face.
So to boil it down, some tips for the folks at home: just kind of limit your distractions, actually listen and engage with everyone else. Because I mean, when you're listening, you're able to think about how you would reply and then properly do so. Figuring out how the social dynamic works in your party, and at least those are a few examples of how you can stay in character. And something that you just kind of touched on there is, I'm going to bring this around to something called the social contract. So some context about what this is. The social contract is an unspoken agreement that everyone who's playing in a game is there to have fun. And no player, even that, and that's including the DM, no one should make any decisions that hurt any of the other players or ruin their enjoyment of the game. So how can we balance staying in character and that social contract?
Well, I think we're just kind of like, as a community and as the game as a whole, moving in a really good direction. That's kind of exemplified, for example, with the red card system a lot of people are using now, and just ways in which we can feel more comfortable literally just telling the DM or the rest of our party, this is not fun for me, I need to stop, and we need to find a way to either change the scenario or make this a more comfortable environment. So I think that's a really important thing, is because sometimes there are times when you might feel uncomfortable and staying in character is no longer an option because your comfort and safety is more important.
My gosh.
Yeah. On a more case by case situation, it can be tough, I guess. Especially like when you have characters that are in conflict with each other. How do you make sure that doesn't kind of bleed into the player's relationship? That can be tough sometimes, especially when you are really in character. Sometimes you end up feeling a lot more than you think you're going to about the situation. I don't know, Annie, do you have any tips for that? Any tips for avoiding that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm still shocked about the red card system. I haven't even heard of that before. I guess I've never been in a situation where things actually that's a lie. I have been in games that have become very unpleasant, but the worst it got was kind of just like arguing over the rules and like, like a player would try and do something and the DM would be like, no, and then the player would like start going through the rule book, 3 rule books later, and we're like 2 hours later in game type of thing, everybody else forgot about it and they'll be like, ha, see? And everybody's like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Mm.
So I think that's literally like the worst case situation I've ever been in, which is, very lucky. So definitely I do like the red card system in the sense that if ever, get caught out and you're in a situation where your safety and comfort is compromised, that is very nice. But I didn't even know it could get that far. I think I've been very lucky to be playing with groups of people who kind of just, I guess they do respect the social contract and everybody understands that whatever you do in character is because of that character. And, and like it's nobody kind of like holds on to anything. Nobody takes anything personal. And we all understand that nobody's ever gone too far, I guess, in the games that I've played. So I've been lucky, I guess, in that sense, where everybody's always been very good about that in all the games.
Mm-hmm. It does help if, especially if you're playing with a group that you do trust all the players. These kinds of situations are less likely to come up. I mean, there's still, like you gave the example there, there's still like the opportunity for a rules lawyer to be like, okay, that's not how this works. But in terms of like content, like sexual harassment in games or torture descriptions, like if something, like if you don't know someone in the group has like a very high sensitivity to something like that, having these kind of rules in place is a good safety measure, because sometimes these topics do come in, and then if you learn that somebody does have a sensitivity, you can avoid that in the future. But typically I would try to bite this kind of thing in the session 0 before the campaign even begins. Usually I'll ask my players, is there any topics that I should avoid? I know one of my players I discovered during one of my campaigns does not like, as a DM, and depending on your play group, the DM will give like gory descriptions of how you finish the enemy. And one instance involved one of our players wanting to replace this player's eye because he had damaged it with a magical item that would act in place of it. And he was like, I can't do eye stuff. And I was like, that is interesting. Because I'd given him this item thinking he would want to use it, but he didn't. And then this came up and I was like, I've learned something. So now I try not to have any eye things with that player.
That is interesting. I guess it has to be case by case. And the DM, again, is like, I mean, the DM is so important. And they are, in a sense, like, they are the game master, but also kind of like the moderator of the entire group, right? So, and they kind of, they are the leader in a sense. And they do set the tone and kind of like the moral standards of the group as well. I think I've been lucky again, and in the groups that I've played in where the DMs are always, I don't know, I feel like the campaigns I've played I have heard about like really intense campaigns where there's like really grueling descriptions and stuff like that. But in comparison to campaigns that I've played in, it feels always like the cartoon version of things. So I just like, there's never any crazy serious issue. And sometimes literally when you kill like a big boss, they'll just be like, they're dead. Here's your loot. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess the moral of the story, I think, is like communication is so key, and it's never too early or too late to establish your boundaries and how you're feeling about a situation. Yeah, I think, it's always a good choice to have little check-ins.
Yeah, and I think it is important to just in general avoid all the major triggers, right? Because it's like you can so easily accidentally kind of like trip them that it's probably better just to, because it is a world that you create, so why make it uncomfortable potentially?
Yeah, unless you've explicitly agreed we're gonna, do a really dark campaign that might involve these subject matters, then for sure.
Yeah.
An example of a lighthearted subject matter that might trigger this kind of thing is if a player's not comfortable with romance in a role-playing setting. So kind of learning if a player's not comfortable with that as well, I think is something that can be touched on too.
Yeah,
for sure. And that's something that you might not realize as a player that you're uncomfortable with until it happens. So that's a case where, as much as you want to stay true to the character and, maintain that immersion within the world, you might have to just say like, okay, let's pause. Let's talk about this because I don't feel about it the way that I thought I might.
Yeah. And I do find that is a bit of a tricky thing for certain people to kind of like separate the romance element between role playing, because I have seen that to separate the romance element between like characters and between players. I find that for certain people it does get confusing, especially if they are new to the game or or if they are not actors also, sometimes it could get a little bit tricky. Sorry, I'm just like I'm totally flashing back to Jane and like people who have made advances to Jane and just like me unable to respond as a person because Jane is not a very good person at responding to that kind of stuff. And I'm just always laughing about it. I was just like, every time an advance to be made in my head, I was like, these are all the 12 things I really want to do to respond. But then Jane would be like, you may share meat with me.
Oh my. Something you brought up earlier, Annie, was you played with somebody who was a rogue and who was constantly stealing from the party. Now, this question I've got here, do you find the existence of game rules hinders your ability to stay in character? Why or why not? Now, the reason that thought brought me to this question is, oh dear, how do I describe this? So in games that I play in, I try to implement rules where if a player is doing something that would affect one of the other players, I give the control of the situation to the player being affected. So like the rogue wants to steal from the barbarian. I go, all right, barbarian, do you allow that to happen? So it's nobody gets hurt by this activity happening, or they can say, I catch them, they don't take anything from me. Now, do you find it would be difficult to stay in roleplay knowing that you have rules that either work with you or against you? I don't know if that was worded properly. Do you guys know what I mean?
Yes, but I guess I'm trying to formulate.
I would say I'm just thinking, I do like the idea of, as much agency as you can give the players in this is good, because I think that's a way to prevent kind of grudges coming up. I think grudges happen when you feel powerless by something that either the DM or another player does. And as long as you kind of have the chance to engage in any way and be part of that scenario, I think you're more likely to have a lot of fun, even if at the end your character doesn't come out on top. At least that was a moment you were involved in making happen.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, actually. And some DMs will be like, well, roll perception to see if you notice them stealing from you. And then if you do notice, they'll be like, roll dexterity, as reflex to see if you can stop them in time from like snatching it and running away or something like that. So, in that sense, it kind of like leaves it up to like, it kind of leaves it up to like your character stats even a little bit, just to a certain extent, because it's kind of like, yeah, I am very good at like, noticing things and like reacting to things. So my character would be able to stop that. So you have a bigger chance of stopping something like that. Whereas if it's a character who's just very oblivious to everything, then you have less of a chance to roll well for those things. And, in return, you probably won't notice your shit getting stolen. And I think that's a fair way of doing it. It's a fair, and I do like that the DM will allow your character to react, as opposed to just be like, well, they stole from you, and your stuff is gone.
Yeah, just in terms of, whether the rules hinder or kind of advance your role playing, I try to think of them again as prompts. Again, like having a background in acting and improv, it's these are, you know, little prompts you're given and big ideas, hopefully more than problems. You know, if your character has to do something a certain way because that's, you know, part of their race or class, or that's how something has to be done, I think that gives you a chance to think about, like, what does this mean for my character? Is this the way they want to be doing things, or do they feel that this is hindering them, and how does that inform their feelings after the fact? So yeah, it's just another opportunity to learn more about your character, I think.
I thought about the sentence. They're like guidelines, really.
They're like guidelines.
It is
They're
what
not
they
rules,
are.
they're
'Cause
guidelines.
I always, yeah, I find that the rules are in place, but you know, there are always opportunities where even the DM will allow them to be broken if it's something that is potentially interesting. And that's kind of what I love about how, you know, like the rules are set in place by us, almost like the DM and the players. And yeah, like, you know, you have all these books and stuff to tell us the general rules, but there's a lot of things that get house ruled because, you know, the DM will decide that something is stupid and it doesn't really apply to this group, and you don't necessarily need that level of discipline or to, you know, to have fun. And, you know, I think it could be very much case by case as well. Because if something interesting develops, then the DM will very likely allow it to just go ahead, and if it doesn't harm anyone, you know?
And we talked a little bit about this earlier with one of Annie's stories, and I find alignment serves much less of a purpose in the recent 5th editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, you were mentioning that you played a paladin who was lawful good, and alignment does serve a purpose, especially with paladins, but I find it's that's where I find a bit of a limitation when it comes to roleplay. Like, if you label yourself as a neutral good character, it's like, well, can I not be crazy every once in a while? And I want your guys' opinion on this as well. But I find alignment so less relevant because people, and especially if we're role playing well, are a bit more spontaneous. But again, I guess it also kind of goes back to Nikki mentioning those guidelines.
Yeah, I find that alignments personally, I don't know if everybody will agree with me, and you know, people might have more strict descriptions of them, but I find all chaotic alignments are just chaotic. Like, whether you're chaotic neutral, chaotic good, chaotic, I find that they're just always like you can't tell sometimes if they're chaotic good or chaotic evil. Like, they're just chaotic. So I always find that really confusing for me. And I don't find that alignments serve a huge purpose unless it's to an extreme of the spectrum. Because if you're just kind of like in the middle, I don't know.
Yeah, I think using the word guidelines, I think it's a good thing to fall back on if, you know, you're kind of struggling with how your character might react to a certain situation. It's good to be like, well, I am lawful good, so I probably would try and find a way to not steal this thing, but I don't think it should be something that would limit you if you have a good reason as, you know, a lawful player to just, you know, go off the deep end. Then I absolutely think you should I don't think you should allow it to limit you as long as you feel like it makes sense with your character to take an action. I don't think you should let, you know, those 2 little words dictate everything about the story you're telling.
Yeah, unless it spurs you into coming up with a really, really creative solution.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good concise way to, you know, fall back if you don't have anything else to fall back on. Yeah. But yeah.
It's an excuse that you use when you really want to do something.
Like, sorry, I'm a Gemini. Sorry, yeah. I'm chaotic neutral, you know.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just so two-faced.
My goodness. Wow. In the end, alignment comes down to what's your horoscope?
Yeah, exactly.
I was born in the year of the rooster, so I'm not going to get along well with rats. Oh my. This is the first time I've really talked about alignment on this show, so I'm actually really happy that we got to touch on that a little bit. Are there any other bits of advice you want to give about staying in character before we move on?
I want to be like, take improv classes, but it's not for everybody.
That's totally viable. Not right now, but
No
In some
touching.
ways, when we went over, when you were just listing the things we were kind of talking about when it came to staying in character, I was like, you know what? That might have been a semester of theater school we just covered. So maybe the opposite is true. Maybe our advice for, actors is just, go.
Yeah. I was
go
actually
seek out people who
exact
did
same
those
thing.
programs.
I was just like, he just listed everything you need to do good scene work.
Basically. But yeah, in short, I think just try and stay engaged and try and enjoy yourself. And I don't think you can go wrong as long as those two things are happening.
Yeah, just have fun. Just have fun with it. I think if you get too stressed about staying in character, then you probably won't end up staying in character because you're going to be too stressed planning. So I think it's just be fun, be spontaneous, and understand that people are not going to, tie you down if you do something slightly out of character. It's just that, yeah, just let loose, throw caution to the wind, take risks. It's a universe where you can do stuff and get away with it to a certain extent. So it's definitely the time to let loose.
And then, as was previously mentioned, if you've got an experienced DM, they'll also likely just come out and tell you, that seems a bit out of character for you.
Exactly. And I've never taken offense to that when that's happened. So I'll just be like, oh, okay, yeah. And, think of something else.
Yeah, as I've never DM'd, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a DM would rather have to make that call every now and then than to try and pull out, any role playing, from a reserved player.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I think that is a fair call. Because at least in that case, they're trying and you're like, all right, let's correct you, as opposed to, let's shut them down.
Yeah. And I have had experience playing with players who are just, they never act in character. They'll just be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to cast this. I'm going to cast that. Okay, I follow the group. So, they kind of like just narrate what they do as opposed to, using the voice and then the flourish and whatever. And it's fine as well. Like we don't really notice. It doesn't break the game. Why is the phone still ringing? I'm so sorry. I unplugged it.
Ooh, spooky phone.
It's a curse. I don't know what
ghost. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take away the enjoyment of the game at all when a person does choose to do that. So they don't have to feel forced to do any of those things.
Yeah, I really like talking about this. This was a lot of fun. But how's about we move on to a game?
For sure.
Let's do it.
All right. And this one seems to be becoming a guest favorite, and I particularly don't mind because this is always hilarious. The game that my guests have decided to play today is the game where I've written a short story and we gotta fill in the blanks with what is likely to be hilarious things. This is Mad Venture Libs. So, I'm sure you guys understand how, these ad-lib games kind of work. And I guess I already pretty much explained it, really. So, I'm going to be saying, I need things like an adjective, a noun, and you guys can collaborate. If you both say something, decide between yourselves which one's better. And I'll be filling in this story as we go along. And once everything's filled in, I'm going to read to you guys this story we've created.
Amazing.
Excellent.
I'm
Let's
ready.
do
I'm
it.
so ready.
All right. So the first thing I need is an adjective.
Jaunty.
Jaunty.
I like it.
All right. I need a plural noun.
Geese.
Geese. All right. I need a second plural noun.
Watermelons.
Oh, there you go.
Which one are we going with?
Watermelons.
All right. Oh my goodness. I can already tell this is shaping up to be quite the silly thing. All right. I need a name.
Wilbert.
Wilbert. And a job title.
So we're just making
people at home,
things trying to get.
Yeah, you can't see this, but there's just all kinds of face making happening.
There are so many.
Gymnast.
Oh my God, you guys have no idea what this means. Okay. A verb ending in ing.
Flaunting.
Flaunting. Amazing. A famous person.
Marilyn Monroe? Sorry, did you want to?
No, go for it. Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Marilyn Monroe. An adjective.
Fashionable.
And a noun.
Wheelbarrow.
Excellent.
It just came to me.
Awesome.
I was like, what's not an animal or food?
I was inspired. I looked out at the snow and I was just like, wheelbarrow.
All right.
Is there actually a wheelbarrow out there?
No, I don't know how it came to me, but just looking outside helped.
Brilliant. I need a past tense verb.
Smote.
Smoked or
No,
smoked?
like smote. Like smiting?
You smite.
Right.
I didn't
All
know
right.
that was the.
I don't know if that exists or like
Smitten?
nerds just
No.
made it.
Yeah,
Smitten
smote. I
something
think it is
else.
smote.
I think
Yeah,
you're right.
it is. It exists on the internet.
Thank you, Internet. I need another job title.
Librarian.
Defense attorney.
I like that. Take hers.
Defense attorney. And this one, we get to be quite creative. I need a magical power with a cost. So specific.
Blood.
The ability. Oh.
I
You
was
say yours,
thinking-
and I'll say mine, and we will decide the best one.
Well, I was just gonna say blood alter, but that's just like an ability that I thought that is in a video game. So that is
I
not
was
even
going to
gonna be usable.
I was going to say the ability to summon gold, but only from your nostril.
Oh, I like that.
Oh,
How would you do that though?
Does
Like,
that
how do you
fit? Like
summon-
it just comes out of your nose. I
Do-
don't know.
do
Is
you
that what
mean-
you were looking for?
Did you say gold or goals?
Gold.
Oh, with the D. I thought you meant goals. I was just like,
Summon goals. Hashtag summon goals.
I get very motivated when I'm sick.
that's true. Allergy
God.
season would be great.
Oh,
Is that the kind of thing you were looking for?
that works perfectly. And the last thing for this story, I need an event.
I don't want to say COVID.
Oh no.
Let's not think
Um,
about that.
The virtual Tony Awards.
That's still very close to COVID. I'm just saying.
I can't believe this. All right. Is everyone ready to hear this story that we have generated?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. So, for this story we have created, the adventuring party known as the Jaunty Geese has been captured. A gang of watermelons surprised them in the night. Wilbert, the gymnast, was supposed to be keeping watch, but got preoccupied with flaunting.
God damn it, Wilbert!
Oh man, he's so bad at his job. This would work in the party's favor, however, as this is the very gang that they had been looking for. Their employer, Marilyn Monroe, hired them to find their fashionable wheelbarrow, which had been smote away by the gang of watermelons. If the party's defense attorney can break the lock, they would be free to search for it. And they do find it. In the clutches of one of the watermelons, they discover that the wheelbarrow has the ability to summon gold, but only from your nostrils. Their job had become difficult once again, and the Jaunty Geese prepare themselves for an intense virtual Tony Awards.
Very nice.
Amazing.
The
Well,
Jaunty
Wow.
Geese.
we have the name of our next campaign for sure.
The Jaunty Geese can be like an offshoot of Chaotic Goat.
Yeah. That's it.
Oh my goodness, these are always silly. I enjoyed those.
Oh yeah, that was quite fun. That was quite fun. God damn it, Wilbert!
Don't trust Wilbert. He cannot keep watch.
Just always flaunting.
So we have one final question for this podcast, and this is our chance to hear from the listeners. This is Question Dicely. So this question is coming in from somebody who's listened to the podcast, and actually this person has been a previous guest. This question comes from Ryan Worthing, and Ryan asks, is there a class you haven't played for any reason?
So I have not played a bard ever. which is surprising because I always say that I probably would be a bard if I were a real life D&D character. And it's just it gets snatched up fast usually when you're putting together a party. So I guess I've always been too nice to be the bard. I've always been like, oh yeah, you take it this time. You do. But I do have an idea for one in me and our DM was thinking of putting together just like a silly campaign where everyone just does the stupid stuff he would not normally allow. So I've thought about being a tabaxi bard whose performance style of choice is interpretive movement.
Oh my gosh.
So in short, she is a kitty cat and she would dance, 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 and dance, dance, dance.
Oh my
goodness.
gosh.
That is brilliant.
Can I
someday.
be a fly on the wall for that? I would love to watch it. Sorry.
No, I mean, we can. This is all hypothetical, so you could probably join on in if you wanted.
Oh my gosh, please invite me. I will be the most ridiculous character ever. Oh my gosh, so many ideas springing into my mind. Okay, I got very excited. I have never played a wizard. And, sorry, Nikki, because this might offend you, because you're a wizard, right?
Again, Thirda in our campaign, yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel it's too easy.
Wow. Okay.
Not that I guess it depends on the way you play, but most wizards I have encountered have always just been like, all right, I am the cavalry, I am the firepower, I will just come in. And despite the fact that you got like a giant fucking barbarian there, you got this rogue backstabbing, the wizard will just come in and fucking explode everything. And that's what kills everybody in every fight. And I'm just like, okay. And I don't think it's the fault of the player. I think it is good that the player is taking advantage, but I just find that their abilities are so overpowered that it's not challenging.
That's interesting, because in my other campaign, I'm a ranger, and I'm always looking at our barbarian like, oh, there he goes with his, like, 3 attacks that do, a gajillion damage. So it's interesting. Might be a grass is always greener situation.
Or maybe you just always pick all the highest damage skills. Who knows?
This is so interesting to hear, because in a way, I do agree about the wizard being incredibly powerful, but that's kind of what I love about them, is how versatile they can be, but they're incredibly squishy. Like, the wizard is the toolbox of, okay, somebody else can't fix this, the wizard probably can. And I think that's so cool, but if they get shot, they're dead. And I think playing martial characters like a barbarian or a fighter, in my opinion, tend to be some of the hardest ones to play in a roleplay sense, because I feel like I don't have as many tools. Like, I literally have to be like, okay, how would I, as an actual person without magical abilities, solve this situation? And then it becomes that much more difficult to problem solve. But in terms of answering the actual question, thankfully I've had the chance to play every class in the game, but the one I've had the least experience with is the rogue, for the same reason Nikki had. Somebody always takes that rogue, because, they're so good. And somebody always wants to be the sneaky person.
Yeah. I think I find that I always tend to end up, and I don't know why I do this, so maybe at some point I'll just make a character that I want. But I always end up making a support character. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm always trying to, because I feel like not a lot of people want to be tanks or healers. Everybody wants to be that one who does the damage, or who is very good at accomplishing a lot of things, and that's great and fun. But without the support characters, I find that these other characters don't really have a moment to shine. Like you said, the wizard is very powerful if they can get close enough to the bad guy, but if you don't have a tank standing there getting, the crap beat out of them, the wizard could just take one step and immediately get flattened. And the same thing with the healers. Like, I don't know what it is, but in every group that I've been in, everybody, it's always like a very, they always begrudgingly take the healer because they were the last person to choose or something. And I find that very unfortunate because people need healers. Like adventuring groups need healers, or it's going to be very expensive to buy all those potions, first of all, or, they just wouldn't survive or go very far without these support classes.
I have started playing with a new character recently that insists that he only wants to be a cleric, and it's the sweetest thing ever, and I love him very much.
There's this character that I am making for a new campaign that might start soon, where she is a healer, a druid who wants to be a healer, but she's going to be very bad at her job because she's very like flighting and shallow and flaky and like, it's like, ew, like, oh my god, I'm gonna break a nail doing this, or like, I don't have enough ingredients. What do you want me to do about this? Like, you gotta pay for it. Like, that's how I plan on it going. I haven't completely shaped her yet. I don't know. She's going to be very like Alexis Shit from Schitt's Creek type of thing. She's very much inspired me to become this character, so we'll see.
Well, plenty of room for character growth then.
Sure.
I always love playing clerics, like kind of like you were mentioning, like it's kind of like if you're the last one to choose, that's typically what ends up happening. And I played with so many first time groups that I was just like, all right, you're all new. You try what you want to do. I'll be a cleric. Mm-hmm. And through this continued process of being a cleric, I've fallen in love with being a cleric. But in a recent campaign I've been in, it's incredibly homebrewed. One of the races that our DM created essentially gave me double the amount of hit points I should have. So I made a wizard. I made Constitution my highest stat over Intelligence, and now I've essentially got 200 hit points as a wizard, and I just do life transference on people. So I've turned my wizard into a cleric again.
Oh, geez.
That's so funny.
I'm just like, I've got so many hit points. I'm going to hurt myself, give you hit points, and this is how we're staying in the fight.
That's really
like
creative.
A reverse necromancer? I like it.
Yeah. I was thinking that.
Yeah, that DM is a crazy mastermind. None of his games are, like, they're all broken. They're all terribly broken, but they're so crazy and so fun. But this conversation pretty much brings us to the end of today's podcast episode. So I want to thank both Nikki and Annie for joining me on this podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's good for having us.
And it was great meeting you and getting to know you. And do either of you have any social media you'd like to plug? Where can people find you to keep up with you on social media? And of course, we got to hear more about this Dungeons and Distancing thing.
For sure. So, well, to start off, if you'd like to follow me I'm on Instagram at Nikki.Haggart. That's all I got. I just got the one. Annie, do you want to do your personal stuff?
Yes. So I'm such a social media whore. So I have Twitter. But I'm bad at all of them. Again, it's like the jack of all trades type of thing, Like I have all of these, but I will go crazy on one for a little while and then forget about it, and then go crazy on the other one for a while and forget about it. Right now I'm on TikTok like a mad woman, but so I do have TikTok, I have Twitter, I have Instagram. I think that's it these are the important ones that I'm really active on, and on all of them I am the Anarchist, so the like THE, because some asshole stole Anarchist from all of these things, so I just decided to add the Anarchist to make myself important, and that's how it came about. So you will find me on those everywhere, and you'll probably recognize me very easily. And yeah.
And as for Dungeons and Distancing, we would love if everyone could go and follow us. Our YouTube channel is Chaotic Goat. That's the name of our production company. And you can also follow us on Twitter at goat_chaotic, which I assume, Annie, you made that, and I assume that is another case of someone stealing Chaotic Goat.
No, I think it just asked me for like my first name and last name, and I was like, I don't know which is which. And I just put one of them somewhere. And then they're like, here's the name we've generated for you. Now it's just like,
We are very bad at social media, but we think we're pretty good writers and actors. So we think if you like, Dungeons and Dragons and, if you know what it's like to be on a Zoom call and have anything go wrong, regardless of why, I think you're going to find this web series very relatable.
and Chaotic Goat, I think, was actually a typo when we created that
I
one.
think it was a typo.
Because what we
It
wanted
was
to go with.
Originally, I pitched as Chaotic Good, and then I forget whose autocorrect had messed that up.
And we're like, actually, this sounds better. We would like to be Chaotic Goat. It's a lot better than Chaotic Good.
Please watch our web series. We're professionals, we swear.
We do make good content. We're not usually, this is actually, I mean, the people in there are very disorganized, but it's very organized, pre-organized disorganization.
The show is quite charming. I made sure to watch them before they came on to the show, and I do recommend checking out Dungeons and Distancing. Are you guys planning on making more episodes?
Absolutely. We have one in the works right now, and we're looking at 3 more for this season. So lots of good content to come.
We're very excited because all the stuff that we've been building, because we have multiple arcs, kind of like, we kind of like planted the seed in the first 3 episodes. So in the other ones, you're going to start kind of watching them build and the storylines are going to start coming together. So we're very excited for people to start discovering that with us.
There will be romance, there will be miscommunications, there will be arguing about what happened on the last LARPing trip.
So essentially all the situations that could have been solved by communicating like we discussed here today.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's all the don'ts of D&D.
That's right.
It's the opposite of this show.
Yes.
Here's a series so you know what not to do at your table. Oh, well, thank you both again for coming on to the show. For anybody who wants to follow them on social media, you can find links below, regardless of whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on any of the places that our podcast lives on. And also, if you are watching it on YouTube, there's going to be a link at the end of this video to get you over to one of their videos, so be sure to check that out as well. And links for their social media, so follow them as well. Thank you both again for joining me on this podcast. It was a delight.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for listening.
And indeed, thank you everybody for tuning in to Speak Dicely. My name is Teni Brant, and I will speak Dicely again with you soon. Bye-bye. The Speak Dicely podcast is produced by Teni Brant. The intro and outro music were created by Salik Brant. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe to the Dicely DnD YouTube channel. There you can listen to previous episodes of the Speak Dicely podcast, as well as watch our introductory series on how to play Dungeons & Dragons. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch at Dicely DnD. And you can now listen to the podcast on Podbean, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Speak Dicely podcast.